great idea. You can even have the funding for it. But you need to leave room in the execution of that model to have that variance, the human condition variance. You can you can pull all the data, you can interpret all the data, you can look at all the comps, you can see all this stuff. And I will tell you, like, you got to go with your gut. You've got to do gut checks all the time, and you got to leave a little room for something to happen. And I don't mean be negative, like it won't work that way, so let's pad. It's more like something amazing could happen in that little space that you leave for magic to happen.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that has grown several businesses to 7- and 8-figure companies, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. And if you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com and grab some time with us to chat. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, and they're all great. So I always say that another great guest, but I always mean it, which is Scilla, and I'm worried I'm going to pronounce it last name. Andreen.
My mom says Andreen, but it's Andreen.
Andreen. All right. I did my best attempt. And I even asked her before the podcast because I try and get the names right, and I still usually slaughter her, but that was my best attempt. So as a quick introduction to Scilla, so she went to NYU and I think studied some poli-sci. Wanted to be an attorney at one point, and then met a director. He convinced her that you can make more and get doing commercials and doing videos and whatnot than you're ever going to make as an attorney. Decided to leave the career, or leave that career in college. Went and worked and did commercials. Started to, I think, was dating or otherwise a director, wanted to marry, kind of freaked out. That wasn't where you wanted to go. Moved to LA, did more creative jobs in LA for a period of time, and then realized that a lot of the films never got picked up. And so with that, kind of saw an opportunity is to hang out or shingle, so to speak, on helping films get found, so to speak, and having that impact. And then she's kind of continued to develop her career from there. So with that much as a introduction, welcome on the podcast, Scilla.
Oh, thanks for having me, Devin.
So I gave kind of the 30-second quick high-level overview, but let's take us back in time a little bit. Tell us a bit about going to NYU, studying poli-sci, and kind of how your life changed from there.
Yeah, great recap, by the way.
Yeah.
So I just remember sitting in the classroom, looking out the window at not the campus, but just in New York City. And I was distracted and bored. I worked 3 jobs, putting myself through school. I really wanted to be a litigator. I love the law. And it wasn't necessarily the director I started dating saying you'll make more money in film, because by the way, you don't in film unless you are like the nano 1%. But I helped him out on a commercial and ended up making $800 a day. And the food was amazing. And I'd never done anything like that before. And I had so much fun that I actually chose to leave school and do this for a while, save up some money, thinking I might go back, and I never did go back. It just kept leading to more things.
So you made, first of all, you made this $800 a day is pretty good. If you could sustain that for indefinitely, if you could just continue to find those commercials, that would be, a pretty decent pay. So you decided, hey, okay. So initially, and with a lot of things, just kind of start out as this will be a temporary thing. We'll do it for a little while, make some money or get some pay, and then we'll, go back to school. And life always takes us in different directions. So you said, okay, I like this. This is fun and enjoyable. Did that for a period of time. And then it sounded like, romantic relationships, or at least on one side, started to develop as in addition to career, but you decided that wasn't the direction you wanted to go. So you moved from where you're at in NYU or New York to LA. Is that right?
Well, my mom was in LA, and my boyfriend at the time had asked me to marry him. And I was kind of like, no, I'm 20, not even 21, right? And
not ready yet.
So I ended up leaving there to go visit my mom, who'd moved to LA, and I got a job doing a low budget movie out of the trunk of my car, which led to me doing other gigs there and using my sort of styling background to move into costume design. And the first gig I got was the Wonder Years TV show. And then I did Party of Five, Dawson's Creek, Smallville, Jack and Jill, and kind of went on to do some really great TV shows as a costume designer. I got even nominated for an Emmy on the Wonder Years. I didn't even know what an Emmy was. I was like, oh, okay. And went to the Emmys. Didn't win though, but I did go. And during my hiatus, I was great. I'm grateful too, because I worked on successful shows. So I would work 9 months out of the year and have 3 months off. And then during those 3 months, I would make a short film or a feature film that I would direct or produce. And then I started going to the festival circuit. And in the film festival circuit, I started to meet other filmmakers. I started to learn how the film industry worked, and got out of my bubble of being just in the studio system. So that was quite an education. And I became really passionate about that community, because unlike when you go down to the theater downtown and you watch a movie pre-COVID, nobody talks to each other. When you go to a film festival, you're talking to people that for some reason, same environment, but a completely different experience. You're connecting with total strangers over content and telling stories.
No, and that that sounds exciting. No, one question I had kind of as you were chatting through that, because you kind of one thing we talked is you found out about underprivileged films, right, or whatever you want to call them. And a lot of films get made or only a small fraction of them get actually picked up or go anywhere. But kind of as you're in that environment, how many films do get picked up? I mean, the only thing I know about movies is when a new movie comes out in the film and it looks good, I go watch it, and I love watching movies. But how many movies don't get picked up?
So I don't know what the stats are today because of the thousands of streaming services out there. But back in those days, roughly, and this was before you could make a movie. This was right before you could make a movie on your iPhone. But there was about 60 to 70,000 films made every year in the world, and less than 1% were picked up.
Wow.
Hollywood only has so much bandwidth, right? And but even still, like there was a sort of an industry thing that I think a lot of filmmakers didn't realize, is that filmmakers want to have their films go to all these festivals and get all these laurels and accolades and have it in front of a live audience. They want people to see it. They spend their time and money to go there. They answer questions. Rarely do they make any money in the festival circuit. It's usually you spend money. It's like a form of marketing. It's kind of a loss leader. It's like a version of a theatrical in a way. The industry actually looks at that. And in the beginning, there's a handful of festivals you can do and win awards and get some reviews. That's good. There's a tipping point. When you start to do too many festivals, Hollywood starts to think you've been exploited already. You've already been seen by too many. I'm not going to pick you up because somebody else would have picked you up by now if you were that good. So you almost become damaged goods. Now, today's world, with all the streaming opportunities, you can go to a whole bunch of film festivals and then go onto a streaming service, and no one's going to think you're damaged goods. But I sort of went off on a tangent. But
let me add, and one question I had, so you're saying really only 1% make it to big mainstream. Some of them go to film festivals. A lot of them really just don't go anywhere. But and again, I'm a bit ignorant, so excuse my question. But is that I you see with the big movies, Avengers or whatever one it is, they spend hundreds and millions of dollars to produce those movies. Are the ones that don't get picked up usually the lower budget ones, or is that some of them that are still high budget ones, or kind of what is that dynamic? And it's really just a personal question or a personal interest question, but I was just curious.
Well, I think we have to break it into two parts. One is there's Hollywood makes their movies and they are already like marketing it while they're making it. And then they spend probably sometimes more money than it costs to make. They spend in P&A to get it out into the world so that they can get that initial box office, which will then, in the old days, it actually did sort of up the ancillary rights where you could, on all the other windows. Nowadays, plus, so that's a Hollywood movie. Now, then there's the film festival movies, which are made for far less money, that Hollywood can come in and purchase. And we hear about some of those deals at Sundance, which, by the way, I think today is day 2 of Sundance. So it's good that you're talking to an independent filmmaker.
Hey, and Sundance is in Utah, so all the better. And I haven't gone to Sundance, but I've been to the same resort that they hold Sundance at. So anyway, small world.
So, although it's not there this year, but
I didn't even know. See, I don't keep track as much as I should.
That's okay. It's virtual this year. And I think they have a pretty amazing platform. It's a lot more interactive, so that they built themselves, is from what I hear. But so you can also, Hollywood will come in and pluck an independent filmmaker out, and give a filmmaker an opportunity and put them on some of the now main streamers. Let's just talk the world of COVID right now, because we're not doing theatrical screenings in any effective way. So there's, okay. I know I got lost on the question. What was the question?
I think it answers it. So there's a few different types of films. Ones that are big blockbusters, they make it, they promote it themselves. Oh, yeah. Some of them get picked up just because they do well enough, or it's interesting enough, or the theaters or streaming services now think that they can make a go of it, and then the vast majority don't. I think the original question I had is just, are these a lot of inexpensive or low budget film or movies, or is it people dump a lot of money into these films and they never go anywhere, and it's it's a bigger gamble or a bigger risk? I think that was the original question.
It's a big gamble, right? Like even Hollywood movies, like look at The Lone Ranger, right? Like they spent I don't know, $500 million making that movie, and then they had to spend another $500 million marketing it, and it was a total turd and nobody watched it, right? And then there are films at like the film festivals, especially the markets, where a film might have been made for a couple $100,000, and then Amazon or Netflix comes in and buys it for $7 or $8 million and releases it, and they take the rights for 3 years, right? Pay the filmmaker every 8 weeks or something, or every quarter. So there's lots of different scenarios, but I think nowadays it's about great quality content, great stories, and I don't think it matters as much what the budget is. If you're a great storyteller,
I agree. My wife and myself love to watch movies. It's always fun. We have a great time, and we consume lots of movies for most of what we do for date nights. But with that, so you kind of had this realization, you've been working in LA, circling back to now your journey just a bit, been working in LA, you get to see the ins and the outs, you get a great experience, you get nominated for an Emmy, you go through all of those things, or an Emmy or Grammy, I forget which one it was. And you have that thing, and then you've kind of come to this realization that you have a lot of films, now that we've chatted a bit about them, that don't get picked up for a myriad of reasons, whether it's they don't have a PR strategy, they don't, people don't watch them, they can't, whatever it is, and some of them are great films. And so how did you then kind of, with that realization, start to form a business around it or form a company around it?
Well, the first thing I noticed in getting to really be part of the festival circuit is how many films are not picked up, and how many great ones, right? Where people mortgage their homes in order to make these movies, and they are sweet and they are deep and you connect with them, and they even many times have stars in them, and yet they didn't get picked up. And so I thought, I should start, kind of naively, my producing partner Carlo and I decided, let's start IndieFlix, which will be a marketplace for filmmakers to come. It'll be non-exclusive. They can put it up there. We will assume the cost of getting it live and making it there. This was pre-streaming, so this was DVD on demand. When streaming came in, we pivoted and started to stream content, which was obviously much more affordable for us. But it was interesting, the journey with that. When you start a company, you go in with this great idea, right? Because it's fulfilling a need. And then you realize, oh, there's this whole other component that nobody told me about, and that's the human condition, right? And when you are going in to help solve something, people are resistant to change. It's unfamiliar. They don't always trust it. So the biggest thing was filmmakers were saying, well, I don't get it. It's non-exclusive. I can put it up there. It's the opposite of Hollywood. First of all, I don't trust you. You're not a distributor. You've never done this before. So I can't believe that. And so the few that I could convince to come onto the platform were basically like, okay, so I still own my rights. I can take it down anytime I want. You've just paid to put me up there, and you're going to deliver, and you're going to be transparent in your accounting, and you're going to pay me my portion. We're going to rev share. And I'm like, yep. And so then when they finally put it up there, they're like, okay, where's my money? And it's like, well, have you been letting people know it's there so that they can buy it? Because we're providing everything else you need, and we're letting people know it's there, but you need to market to your audience. You know who that audience is because you made this movie, you've been to the festival,
them, yeah.
You raised the money, and they were like, I'm not a marketeer, I'm a storyteller. So I'm like, I remember being in that space. And then, then you got the other people who were like, because we were so early with streaming that they were like, I'm not going to put my credit card online. That just doesn't feel right. And it's like, but you do when you buy a plane ticket. You do for DVD. Like, I don't understand, right? So it was just getting people to do that. And then people were like, I don't want anybody watching my movie on an iPhone, right? because everyone, that whole controversy, like, oh, you can't watch Mission, like a big, beautiful movie on an iPhone. That's just terrible. You have to watch it in a theater on a big screen. And so there was that whole conversation. And then like the world economy went into the toilet in 2008 or 7. And, it was just like watching the world do its thing and knowing that filmmakers are people and they need mothers and managers. And so like you can create this wonderful platform that is actually like it's a little hard to believe it exists, but it does. So just getting them to actually trust it and to participate in it, and then coaching them to say, but you do know how to market because you raised money and you got into festivals and you got butts in seats and you like, and then encouraging them to do that. And it was just like, wow, like this is, and then of course the other side is we grew so much that we had over 12,000 titles with worldwide rights and we streamed globally and we were content from 85 countries. And I had so many filmmakers that my whole time was spent talking to them. And they're like, I've been up there for 3 months and I haven't seen any money. I'm like, well, are you marketing it? Are you doing this? Well, you need to help me. So then that was my world. And I'm a filmmaker. And I thought I'll just hang a shingle naively and empower filmmakers and we'll all be in this together and we'll learn from each other. And I ended up in a role that wasn't what I expected. And so today I now make content and distribute and create tools. We learn from each other, we share, and it's just way better now. So, but it took years to get there.
No, and I think that's, but that's a lot of the plight sometimes of an entrepreneur, right? You have a great idea. First of all, you have to figure out how to implement that idea. But even once you do that, it's now creating the market or convincing the market that there's a need for it. And then once the market's convinced, it's, how do we now operationally launch this, get it going, and get people that are willing to pay for it, they're willing to, do something about it, and they're willing to use it. And, that's both the fun of it, the stress, the frustration, all wrapped in one. So now as you've, had that realization, got things going, started to work on, and I think that you also shifted, we chatted a bit more about, moving to kind of social impact films, a bit more offline into the communities, screening events and everything else, or otherwise kind of looking for the community impact. And that's kind of where you focus the core. But now looking towards the future, kind of where do you see the next 6, and I know that the film industry in particular is a bit unknown between COVID and theaters doing down, going virtual, streaming platforms. With all that in mind, kind of where do you see the next 6 to 12 months going for you?
Well, so pre-COVID, so there's two parts of our business. One is the streaming side of the business. And then like you mentioned, the social impact side. I decided to go back to my own filmmaking roots. And I got involved in social impact films, which instead of, I realized I got sent this one film. It was called Finding Kind. It's about girl bullying. And I watched it in my living room as a rough cut. They were looking for some finishing funds. And I watched it. And the first thing I felt was I wanted to talk to somebody. And I didn't have anyone to talk to. And I'd been so bullied as a kid that it just brought up so much for me. And I thought, wow. So we ended up bringing in some finishing funds. And instead I said, can we just take it to schools to watch in schools and not put it online right now? And let's just do that for a little while, kind of like our version of a theatrical. And then we'll put it online because we'll do that to just raise awareness. And we took it up to my daughter's school and screened it for the 6th and 7th graders. And it was so powerful that before we could even think about ways to go to other schools, they were already calling us. And that started this whole other side of the business where, and I will tell you, my stakeholders were scratching their heads. They're like, you're the CEO of a global streaming service and you're putting energy into little school screenings, which was like, yeah, I know, but there's this really strong demand. So now cut to, now we do, 10,000 school screenings for a particular film across 90 countries. So it has just ballooned into a whole nother arm of the business that is purely offline. But then let's cut to March when COVID hit and we pivoted. And now instead of sending out a link where they would basically use their venue and put their butts in the seats and license our content to have a conversation, whether it was about anxiety or bullying or empowerment or equality, now they come to our platform. We do virtual community screenings and we can house anywhere from like 30 people to 10,000 people in one event. And then we're now getting them to cross over into the streaming side of the business where they can access 4,500 more titles of content for a purpose. So I went in, I let go, 2/3 of our library because I really wanted to focus on being a platform of content for a purpose, content for good, bring us together, build community with content, and to learn about the story behind the story.
No, and I think that's cool. And I think that's certainly an exciting direction to go, and something that, can be impactful and be rewarding in and of itself. Well, now as we've kind of chatted through your journey, it's always a good transition. I always have two questions I ask towards the end of the podcast. We'll jump to those now. So first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
So the worst business, I actually have two.
All right, go ahead.
One is, I hired the person with the best resume, but I didn't quite connect with them. I had done so much on my own with my, I'm an NYU dropout. I don't have a marketing degree. I don't have a business degree. So I did so much on my own. I kind of discounted my own sort of knowledge and wisdom and insight and experience of growing the business on my own with advisors and people involved. And I thought, I need to bring someone in who can really help me take that business to the next level. And instead of hiring someone that I just completely connected with, I hired a person or people, I've done it multiple times, and I've now really learned my lesson, who just had the resume, right? Like, they had done this before. They were big time. They did it in their sleep. They were a phone call away from something. And I just thought, great, this is the silver bullet. And it was disastrous each time, because they either needed too many people, too many meetings, a whole bunch of money to implement. They didn't move fast enough. They came from massive organizations. And while that sort of like that person and that title being in this tiny little company looked like something, I realized, they didn't have the same ammunition, the same tools that they had become accustomed to operate so beautifully in that world. They couldn't replicate that in our small world. So I really now stick with my gut. I go with the person with, yes, the skill set, but mostly that I connect with, like that we get each other, because you're going to be like married to this person. The other thing I would say, a bad business decision, which is really more of a personal thing, is I used to, when I was fundraising, I would go into rooms and I would do all my homework and all my studying, and I would do the heavy lifting. And then the minute I crossed over into that room, I gave up my power. I felt like, because they had money, they knew more than me, they had total control, and whatever they said was going to be the gospel. And it took me a while to start to realize they're not always going to have the right idea and response. They're not all going to be smarter than me. And by the way, 99.9% of them were men, and 98, 97, 98% of them were white men, which was fine. And I would have not even noticed that until like in today's world. But I would go in and I would literally leave myself at the door. And that's a mistake. Like,
and I definitely, those are both two lessons to learn from. I think that, definitely one's understandable how you make the mistake. And also too, I think learning from our mistakes and how we can do better always makes us stronger. So I think those are both great insight. Now, as we jump to the second question, which I always ask is, if you're now talking to a startup or a small business, what would, somebody that's just getting into a startup or small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
I think, harkening back to what I said in the beginning, you have a great idea. You can even have the funding for it. But you need to leave room in the execution of that model to have that variance, the human condition variance. You can pull all the data, you can interpret all the data, you can look at all the comps, you can see all this stuff. And I will tell you, like, you got to go with your gut. You've got to do gut checks all the time, and you got to leave a little room for something to happen. And I don't mean be negative, like it won't work that way, so let's pad. It's more like something amazing could happen in that little space that you leave for magic to happen. But also be prepared for, like for me, when I started learning, like the response from filmmakers, from audience, whether it was using technology or the entitlement of being live on something and where's the money, like the education piece, the familiarity piece, the trust piece is a big one. And you have to leave room for that to be breathing and alive and pay attention to it. And then I would also just add as a little bonus, be honest. Have integrity. Don't do things that put you out of integrity with yourself. It will come back to bite you.
No, and I think that's another great insight or a great piece of advice in the sense that too often you're wanting to cut corners or you're wanting to do something that's in the gray area on the line. And, well, it's just this one time, and yet I think that having that integrity and being honest has a big impact that oftentimes overlooked, but is a major thing. Well, as we wrap up, and just as a reminder to viewers, this episode we do have the bonus question talking a little bit about intellectual property and your biggest question you have on it. But as we wrap up, before we jump to the bonus question and wrap up the normal episode, if people want to reach out, they want to find out more, they want to support the films, the community impact, they want to see the other things you have going on, they want to be an investor, they want to be a customer, they want to be an employee, they want to be your next best friend. Any or all of the above, what's the best way to connect up with you and find out more?
Just go to indieflix.com. It's like Netflix, but IndieFlix, Flix, Indie, not like indie cars, but IndieFlix.com. And you can go in there. There's a lot of information. You can see the catalog of content you can watch, but I think going into like the education sector of the site, you will get to see our social impact films that were out. And there's lots of opportunity to participate with us. I'm looking for new people to film for my next film, Race, which is a documentary about the impact of race and racism on our mental health and how we can raise the next generation to be anti-racist. So I am looking for support on that project. And for people who want to bring our other social impact tentpole films into their communities, schools, and organizations.
Well, awesome. Well, I definitely encourage everybody to check out your indie films or indie flicks by going to indieflix.com. Support your causes, and maybe even somebody will apply and be one of the people on your next movies. Who knows? But with that, as we wrap up, thank you for coming on the podcast. For all of you that are now listeners, if you have your own journey to tell, feel free to go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the podcast. Also, if you're a listener, make sure to click subscribe so you get notifications as all our new awesome episodes come out, and leave us a review so new people can find us. Last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents and trademarks, feel free to go to strategymeeting.com, and we're always here to help. Thank you again, Scilla. It's been a pleasure. Now hold on, and we'll do the bonus question for all of you listeners. If you're wrapping up, thanks for listening. And now we'll go over to the bonus question. So bonus question is a bit of you get to turn the table. So I usually pepper you with the questions and get or pick your brain a bit and ask you about your journey. But now I do a lot of patents and trademarks, have Miller IP law. So flipping the tables a bit, what's your number one intellectual property question?
So I have a program, a film, a product, which is one of our movies. It's about it's a mental health film, which has all these wraparound materials and a curriculum and a book. And I have an opportunity to take it out into China, and I want to protect it.
Yeah, I mean, China's always a bit of a mystery or a bit of a Wild West in the sense that, they are, I would say 20 years ago, they just didn't care about any intellectual property. If they could, I remember, so I lived in Taiwan for a couple of years with doing a religious mission for my church. And I'll get to your question, but give me an aside. So, my parents, after I finished up my mission, we went and toured around to Taiwan for a bit. And we also went to China. Both places, I remember you go to what they have night markets are, and they would just have people that have movies were strewn on blankets, and it would be new movies that were still in the theater. You could buy them, and they were good quality, like they were good films. You could buy them, they weren't legal, but you could buy them on the street, and they were selling them for $5. And so you wanted to go watch a new movie, you just go buy it for $5 on the movie. And so that was kind of their approach. Now that as they've continued to enter the world stage, they are looking to try and be more respectful of intellectual property, and they're trying to actually recognize that if we're going to have people that are entering into our economy and wanting to sell things and be a bigger world player, we have to have some sort of structure in place. So with all of that as kind of a backdrop, generally, same within the U.S. as anywhere, movies are protected under copyrights, meaning if you're going to do it, anything that's a creative work, whether it's books, movies, or posters or anything else, you're going to file as a copyright. So you can do that in the U.S. If you do it in the U.S., it protects in the U.S. So, anything that any of your customers, if you're wanting to make sure that they don't infringe your copyrights or they're not taking on a big scale, you file a copyright. Really, that's your best bet in China. And as far as that, you can enforce it. They're getting better, but they're the Wild West. It's still a bit of the Wild West, so it's better than nothing. but you're going to just probably, when you enter in China, just have to have the recognition that it's going to be less, or you're going to have less options to protect it than you would in the US. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there's no international kind of copyright.
It's not almost and I can't think of an exception. Everything really with intellectual property is going to be country by country, and so you have to file. And that's kind of the same thing whether it's a trademark and branding. Let's say you wanted, you have a great brand in the U.S. and you want to go expand out. You have to file your trademarks in Europe or China or whatever. And so really everything is country by country because every country has a bit of their own laws. They'll have their own kind of fee structure. They have their own determination as to what's trademarkable or copyrightable or patent. So unfortunately, there isn't just an international one that you can file, and it is kind of just going on a country by country basis.
Okay.
All right. Well, with that, thank you for your question. It's fun a little bit to chat about intellectual property. If you or any of the listeners have any more questions, feel free to go to strategymeeting.com. We can dive in a bit deeper and always chat. But for there, we'll wrap up the podcast. Thank you again, Scilla, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks, Devin. You take care, and take care, everybody.